WDET, I'm Tia Graham. Growing exotic mushrooms is a popular way to bring nutrition and flavor into your home kitchen. In recent decades, buying mushroom kits has gotten easier, but it's introduced an entirely new problem. Spores from golden oyster mushrooms have left the kitchen and are now spreading through forests in the Midwest. Joining me now to explain the impact of the golden oyster mushroom spread in the Midwest and its forests is Ashura Virabahu. She's a PhD botany student at the Pringle Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Ashura, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm excited to have you on. I heard that you were doing a little picking before you were on the air with us today.
I was indeed.
Yes, so cool.
I got a full kind of paper bag of them.
I love that. So you co-authored an article in Current Biology that shared some concerning findings about the golden oyster mushroom. What did you and your colleagues find out?
We found out that in dead trees, which that's like the substrate that golden oyster grows on, is dead trees or logs anywhere. We found that the dead trees that are colonized by golden oyster mushrooms have about half the fungal biodiversity as dead trees without golden oyster mushrooms. And so that's pretty important, because if you've ever seen mushrooms sprouting, out of logs in the forest, these dead trees and logs are a really important habitat for fungal biodiversity. And they help break down those logs, and they help kind of recycle the carbon that has gone into them. They decay that wood and then release that carbon back into the environment. And so we're pretty concerned that fungal community is changing because of invasive golden oyster mushrooms.
And how does the spread of the golden oyster impact other mushrooms and fungi?
It's pretty much displacing them in the wood. So it's we don't know the exact mechanism of this yet, but it's either taking up space and kind of like colonizing the wood quicker than other fungi can, or it might be directly sort of battling other fungi. So I know it's kind of odd to imagine that this is happening out there, but this is what happens every day in the wood. Is fungi kind of battle for resources and for territory. And so in that battle, it seems like golden oyster is winning far, far beyond what native fungi are capable of standing up against.
And when other fungi are displaced, what does that do for other flora and fauna in an ecosystem?
Well, there are a number of things that we are concerned it could do. Again, we haven't studied this yet, but we're excited to see what could be found in the future. We're concerned that one huge thing it might change is carbon emissions that come from wood decay, because that wood decay process I mentioned earlier is mediated by which fungi are in that wood. It might, let's say, we're worried it could decay faster if it's just golden oyster there. And another thing we're concerned about is fungi contain a lot of potentially like therapeutic compounds that could be important for human medicine, like penicillin, for example, came from fungi. So we're worried about what kind of medicines could we be losing if we never get the chance to discover those fungi out there. And then another thing we're concerned about is in the process of decaying those wooded habitats, those wood habitats are something that birds rely on, that tree seedlings rely on. And so there's a lot of other forest dynamics and forest critters that depend on this entire process that's tied around dead wood and wood decay and even trees remaining standing after they die. But something that we've kind of anecdotally seen is that when golden oysters get into a tree, they chew through them so fast that they take out all of the strength in that standing dead tree and they bring them down. And that could be really bad for habitat for other species and other animals.
Aishwarya, so there is a lot at stake. We would notice something like a tree species or a bird species going away, but what about species we don't know about, like bugs or even fungi? Why is biodiversity so important on a global level?
Biodiversity is vital on a global level because it allows that biodiversity, really what it holds is genetic variation. And so when we have biodiversity, a species has the chance to adapt and evolve to a changing landscape, right? So if there's a lot of diversity in that gene pool, which also takes the shape of just raw biodiversity, there's a chance that all of those species could kind of, roll and adapt to anything that comes their way, especially when we think of things like climate change. And so we always want biodiversity out there. And something else I like to think is biodiversity deserves to exist simply just because, period. They've been evolving on this earth, same as us, for millions of years. And so they deserve to be out there just like we do.
And, as we switch gears here, what is a golden oyster mushroom in the first place? What makes it so unique?
Well, it's a edible species of mushroom. It has like a bright yellow cap on top, and it has like milky white gills and a milky white stem. And so they're pretty distinct. There's not many lookalikes, and not really any dangerous lookalikes that I can think of. So I think most people can be pretty confident when they come across them that you have found this. And it is native to a pretty broad range of countries in East Asia. And it was brought over because it is edible and it can be cultivated. And so that's how it was brought over to North America in maybe around the 1980s to 2000s. We can't know for sure. But we have clearly really taken to it. I don't think it tastes like really, really special.
I'm kind of more of a what does it taste like?
I'm more of a morel chanterelle person myself, but yeah. And then, like I mentioned, the last thing that they do is they grow their wood decay mushrooms, so they grow on dead wood.
Wow! And here in Michigan, where have golden oyster mushrooms been spotted?
They've been spotted, it seems, pretty much throughout the state, unfortunately. Like, they've even been spotted in the Upper Peninsula, which to me is really concerning. I know that y'all have quite a lot of beautiful old-growth forests, yes. and those kind of old-growth forests tend to be the ones that have the richest fungal biodiversity, along with, biodiversity of plants and animals as well. And so it seems to be across the state, but it seems to be particularly prolific in kind of the southern half of Michigan.
Wow. Right where we are. And, based on what you all have been able to uncover, how fast are they spreading throughout North America in general?
They seem to be spreading really rapidly. They've filled up kind of the Midwest and Northeast part, but it feels like just in the past few months, as I've been talking to people about my research, I've found out that it's even been spotted in like New Orleans, in North Carolina. And so there are some kind of oddball places where they've been found, and so I'm worried that they could spread kind of further into the south. And then I've also recently learned that they've been found like growing on oak trees, for example, which is kind of different than the elm trees that I usually find them on around Wisconsin. And so with that mention of oak, I'm a little bit worried that they might be able to get a foothold out west as well.
Wow. And, home mushroom kits are a popular hobby for mycologists like yourself, but especially for home cooks who want to raise exotic mushrooms that are either too expensive to raise at home or not available to them. How do those kits actually work?
Well, the kits work by you're pretty much sending like a live culture or a live kind of set of growing conditions along, like everything that the golden oyster needs to grow for a few weeks, which we call spawn or substrate. it's that is what's inside the kit, along with a live culture of the golden oyster itself. And so it kind of has everything that it needs to grow and then reproduce, so produce the mushroom structure. That's what's in the grow kits. But I will say that this is definitely not that the grow kits are not the only way that they could have spread. There is a chance that it could have come from, honestly, a number of different sources, but also like the cultivation, like mushroom farms. So I somewhat recently learned that mushroom farms, have to like vent their facilities to let the spores out for the safety of their workers. And so I definitely don't want to pin this just on hobbyists, especially because a lot of hobbyists are the ones that first spotted this problem, and they kind of like raised the issue by logging their observations on biodiversity databases online, such as iNaturalist and Mushroom Observer. They posted their observations online, and that's how we even got a sense in the first place that, oh no, you know what, this might have spread. So most importantly, there could have been multiple ways that it escaped, and honestly, it's no one's fault, really. There have likely been multiple introductions.
Wow. You're listening to The Metro on WDET. We're talking about the spread of an exotic, delicious, but invasive mushroom that is spreading throughout Midwest forests, the golden oyster mushroom. My guest is Aishwarya, Virabadu, a PhD botany student at the Pringle Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She co-authored an article in Current Biology on the spread of golden oyster mushrooms and how they impact biodiversity. Now, you are a leading citizen science data collection project. You're leading that right now to find out where the mushrooms have spread outside of Wisconsin, of course, where you're located. How does your community project work?
Yeah, I'm really excited about my community project. How it works is I've been trying to get the word out, so thank you for helping me with that. Folks from all over North America, if they come across a golden oyster like specimen in the wild, they collect a few mushrooms of it, and then they mail it to me at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so I kind of love looking in my mailbox. It's a little bit like Christmas morning every time. And I'm going to be extracting like the DNA from all of these samples to try and figure out essentially whether the golden oysters have evolved. Have they adapted? Has something changed on a genetic level inside them that helps answer why they have become so invasive?
Wow. And for people who want to contribute, what will they need to do in order to be a part of the team?
Yeah, they can. So if they just look up Pringle Lab on the internet, they'll be able to find like our lab website. And on the little left-hand side bar, they'll see Golden Oyster Community Project. Just click on that, and then they can read the instructions that I've set up there. But really, the only thing you have to do is find the address, find some golden oyster mushrooms, and then send them over to me.
We'll put a link on WDET.org when we post this conversation as well for folks who are interested in participating, sending in a sample over to Wisconsin right now. It's really, really amazing. So what have you found out so far? And are people already submitting some observations? Clearly they are, but how many have you received and what's been the interest?
I've received about 30 so far, and people really do seem to be interested. It's honestly very touching, and it makes the science I do feel so much more real. I really love being able to work with the community because this whole project feels like it belongs to the community that figured out this was happening, for kind of the first national conversation that we're having about invasive mushrooms, I'm glad that it belongs to all of us. And so, so I've received about 30 samples. I'm particularly interested in samples from kind of remote areas, especially if you're kind of a bit farther away from a city center. Or if you go on iNaturalist.com, or I think it could be iNaturalist.org, actually, and if you look up golden oyster mushroom, you'll see the kind of range of where it has spread so far. I'm also really interested in getting samples on the edges of that range. So I'm kind of talking for at least for Michigan, I would really be interested in like northern Michigan samples because that's kind of on the edge there. And, I won't be able to kind of start looking into my findings or like finding anything out until I have all of the samples together. So, stay tuned.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how many samples do you need in order to actually begin to see correlations or seeing some type of pattern?
I'm hoping for at least 50.
Okay.
100 would be like ideal.
Okay.
I'm really in the case of this type of study that I'm doing is called a population genomics study because I'm looking at the genomes of this entire population across North America. So these kinds of studies are stronger the more samples we have and the more genomes we have.
And Aishwarya, what we're doing with the community part of this project, or what you're doing with the community part of the project, is actually like really, really cool to hear you saying, how we will tangibly see some results out of the work that folks are doing just foraging out by themselves. But it's a cool way for people not just to get involved with what you're doing, but also to get involved with science and see something that's eventually peer reviewed in a journal as well. So could you talk about any improvements you've seen or how technology, smartphones, AI has helped changing science in any way?
Yeah, I think one huge part of it is just like everyone's accessibility to like phones and the internet helps them when they come across a mushroom that they might not know of in the forest. They can take a picture. That picture is probably going to automatically record their geographic data, right, their location. And also when they, maybe let's say they try and image search it on Google, or if they try and post it to iNaturalist, both of those places have algorithms that will try and identify the mushroom that they've come across, which I think is amazing because even just 10 years ago, you kind of had to like spend a bit of time, like at least a few months studying mushrooms to really know what you're looking at. And so I think that that image recognition and AI and machine learning has really helped people start to get a little bit closer to knowing what they're looking at when they are starting from a place of, I'm totally brand new to this. I will say, of course, that we can't always trust those things. Those technologies are still, being worked out and getting better. And especially in the case of mushrooms, I would always want to put trust in a person who fully knows what they're talking about and who has studied and can tell you this one is dangerous or this one is safe to eat. So, yeah, the technology has been amazing. And in my project particularly, being able to see, people recording it in remote parts of the world and seeing it spread all over North America, we wouldn't be able to have that without the technology to kind of take these pictures, upload them, and have algorithms figure out, hey, we think you spotted golden oysters. So I don't think this project would really exist without that kind of tech.
And just speaking of safety, because I was actually just speaking with our executive producer, David Lyons, about, wanting to get into foraging as well, but not really, feeling like he understands what he's doing. He wants to be more safe when he's foraging. So let's talk more about the safety part. How can people start foraging safely? Are there community groups, classes to take? And how can people safely forage for mushrooms, not just golden oysters, but any of the edible species that grow here in Michigan?
Yeah, there are absolutely like community groups. I think that's a first really good way to kind of get involved and meet some other people who are trying to do the same thing as you. So I'm sure Michigan has a number of clubs. They can also be called like mycological societies. So the first things you can try and type is, let's say, Detroit Mycological Club or Michigan Mycological Society to try and find those mushroom clubs. And if you're kind of, you want to take this solo at first, you can just look up like Michigan, edible mushrooms. And so it's a lot easier to just learn the list of mushrooms that are edible because they're a much smaller list, and focus on learning those first. And that way you can go out there and be like, oh, okay, this resembles the one that I looked at a lot of pictures of or like really learned and studied about, rather than trying to memorize an entire list of, maybe tens of thousands of fungi that might be in Michigan. And then another cool thing that could take you into eventually is you might even get interested in collecting those local edible fungi and cultivating those instead of cultivating exotic fungi like golden oysters. And so if people are like, I want to do some cultivation, I'm still excited and I want to do that, but how do I, what's an alternative? Just try and find the edible species somewhere in your local forest and try it with that first.
Aishwarya, what tools do we have right now to stop or slow the spread of invasive golden oyster mushrooms? Is it a chemical treatment, mechanical hand removing, harvesting, eating if people pick them? What can we do there?
Very unfortunately, there is no tool and no method we can do right now to remove them. It's hard enough to deal with invasive animals and plants. And fungi are just a step harder than that because the mushroom body that we see is just the reproductive part. So you can almost think of it as like the fruit of a tree. But the rest of that tree for a fungus is called its mycelium or mycelia. And it is spread throughout the wood, sometimes the soil, but basically it's hidden and diffuse in its environment. And so there's really no way to get it out. And I have a small bit of hope that if it is somewhere that you suspect is new, like let's say you're somewhere in northern Michigan and you've seen on iNaturalist that there's no other spottings of golden oyster around you, but you find it on a log, I would still make an attempt to contact like a local park or forest official and let them know, like, hey, can we try and get this log out of here? It's got an invasive fungus growing on it. Or if it's on your property, I would try and take it and burn it. I don't know if that is foolproof, and I don't know if it will fix it for sure, but I think it's at least a solid attempt.
Wow. And one more time, can you describe what these look like for folks who are tuning in, listening right now? And how do you know, once again, that it is a golden oyster?
Yeah, it's going to have this bright yellow cap. Just think like Crayola crayon yellow. And it'll have a pure white, milky white gills and stem. And they're usually going to be growing in a cluster. So you'll find multiple mushrooms in one cluster. And also because it's invasive here, you're probably going to find other multiple clusters nearby. So all of those things are a good indication that you've come across golden oyster.
Well, I think I know a lot more than I did beforehand. So thank you so much because you just taught us so much about what's going on with the invasive golden oyster mushrooms. Aishwarya Veerabahu is a PhD botany student at the Pringle Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She co-authored an article on the spread of the invasive golden oyster mushrooms and is leading a community data gathering initiative to track the spread of the mushrooms across the U.S. We'll put a link to the Pringle Lab website in the web story for this conversation. You can also report sightings of the golden oyster mushroom in the wild at inaturalist.org. Thank you so much, Aishwarya, for joining us on the Metro today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, costumes, character actors, and 16th century themed activities. The Michigan Renaissance Festival is happening now through the end of September. We'll dig into what makes it such a popular destination every single year. You all stay right there. This is The Metro.